Hey y'all, it's Jasmine. Making this show has been such a wild journey, but the whole thing might not have happened if it weren't for one particular moment. You might remember it from episode 1.
Mis guatemaltecos, mis hondureños. Central America has been transformational because of the politics.
Yeah.
Her arm has got the most beautiful tattoo I have ever seen in my life. And it is of El Arzobispo Arnulfo Romero on her arm.
So that's a recording of a live show of the podcast Latino USA. It's hosted by journalist Maria Hinojosa, and she's interviewing Salvadoran comedian Marcella Arguello, who has a giant tattoo of Oscar Romero's face on her arm. You should Google it. It's fantastic. And it was that tattoo and that conversation that made me realize that I had so much more to learn about the history of my family and the place that we all come from. So I guess I owe a little bit of this show's existence to Marcella. I first heard about her a couple of years ago on Twitter and completely fell in love with her unapologetic and raw comedy style.
My thing is, you know when you meet people and they want to have small talk, what do you do? Oh my God, I love your outfit. I don't like that.
In this episode, I sit down with Marcella and talk about her own family's immigration story and what it's like representing two countries as a Salvadoran American. But first, I had to start with the image that started it all, her tattoo. You listen to episode 1, you know that, your tattoo was a big point of inspiration for me on this journey. I'd love to hear the story of the tattoo and what inspired it and why you got it in the first place.
Well, thank you also for doing this podcast. Literally the reason I wanted to get this tattoo was so that more people knew about him, because nobody knows about him. It's just us. And a lot of our own people don't know his whole story, right? And I know that, you had talked about how you kind of didn't even know who he was until you got older. I was fortunate that my parents always brought him up. We knew he was the reason. We knew he was the catalyst. We knew my parents were forced out of the country. They didn't want to leave. So I knew what a big influence he was for so many people to leave because they were so scared. And my mom always said, we knew that if they were willing to kill a priest, they were willing to kill any of us. I actually just found an old paper that I wrote in college about my parents' experience. And I was I think I was 18 years old. And I haven't read it yet because I was like, oh, this seems like it's going to be heavy, reading about my mother's journey. And she told it to me when I was a teenager. And we already kind of knew, but it's just been such a heavy thing that I carry. And I think that I hate that so many people, they just want to know your background. They go, where do you live? What is your background? Where are your parents from? And I kind of hate those questions. I said it on the podcast of Latino USA at the event that you saw my tattoo with Maria Hinojosa. I basically tell people I don't like small talk. I like big talk. I want to let's find, what do you believe? I like to know exactly where people are coming from when we start a conversation. I'm not a big, oh, the weather is so nice today, huh? The weather, look at, traffic. Oh, God. It's nah. Do you know about Oscar Romero? The priest that was killed in El Salvador, he was the catalyst for the Salvadorian Civil War. He's the reason my family's here. I like that. I like to put a little pressure on people's conversations because it's if you're not willing to talk about this or learn about this, I guarantee you we won't have anything interesting to talk about. And when I bring up Oscar Romero and I can have that conversation really quickly, that's what's so cool about having a huge tattoo in your arm. People are always like, is that your dad? Who is that? Some idiot the other day after a show was like, I thought it was Martin Scorsese. I'm like, yeah, okay. Eyebrows, that's all you saw? Okay, cool. I don't know what to tell you, man.
Well, and I think Oscar Romero is a really interesting figure because he, the fact that there's a statue of him in Westminster Abbey next to Martin Luther King, every year in the U.S., politicians will tweet out on Martin Luther King's birthday, the words of Martin Luther King, and we got to honor his memory, and on both sides of the aisle. And in the 1960s, these people were not supporting Martin Luther King. And it's the exact same thing with Oscar Romero, right? Like now that he's a saint, everyone's like, oh, of course, Oscar Romero. We love Oscar Romero. There's a reason it took 40 years for him to become a saint. It's because at the time, people were not rolling with him.
Right.
And
it was also scary. It was also scary. Imagine if this, like my parents said, if they were willing to kill him, they were willing to kill any of us. Imagine if you just expressed your love or sadness for him. Like, I'm sure people were like clocking you like, okay. Again, that's why I'm like, I'm going to get this tattooed on my body. I want this to be, it's a point of pride for me. And it's like, I don't exist as a stand-up comedian in the United States of America without his murder. Like, it's the butterfly effect, and it's so sad, but I'm also extremely appreciative. And that's why I don't want his gospel to die. I don't want his memory to die. That's why it's such an honor that you were inspired to do this podcast, because it's literally why I got it. I want people to know more about him. I just want people to know about him.
And you really nailed it. Like, so much of history is the butterfly effect of that moment. And, I think it's why he's such an important figure in Salvadoran history, because, there's a lot of debate about like whether or not the Civil War would have happened. But I really genuinely think like if he hadn't been murdered, my family would not have ended up in LA.
Yeah.
And that's the same for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what's so crazy is that my parents do have that clarity of like, no, we knew. That was the reason we left.
And what did your parents think about the tattoo when you got it?
Well, so it's, people, I don't know how well people know this, but Latino parents, they do not like tattoos. I mean, and right now, and as we know, in El Salvador, they're like, if you have tattoos, we're arresting you, which of course didn't mean for everybody, but they, like if you looked a certain profile, they were arresting you, right? Throwing you in jail. And so like my parents, I should say my mom was always against tattoos. My mom was very, Catholic, and just doesn't, they think they're a bad idea. My dad passed away, so he didn't get to see it. But when I told my mom, I was like, I have my next tattoo idea. She was like, ay, Marcela. All this, it's like she had that all like disappointed, ready to hear some stupid cartoon I was going to put on my body. And I told her what I was going to do. And she was like, okay, that's okay. That's okay. You can do that.
Oh, yeah. She was for it.
She was for it. And then when it got closer to the date, she was like, I don't think you should do this. I don't think you should. And I think it was because her reaction to that came with the whole like, the mareros. Like she was just like, no, that's just too close to that. I don't want you doing that. And I was like, oh, well, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways. And then when I got it, once she saw it, she was like, that's beautiful. And every relative loves it. And anytime anyone that sees it in the family, they're just like, oh, this is so beautiful. This is so cool. It's such a point of pride for everybody, which I think is cool because I'm turning that mentality of like tattoos are only for gangbangers into like, no, tattoos are beautiful art.
It is. It is a really beautiful tattoo.
Thank you. I love it. I really love it. And I like seeing it. It's like a nice reminder. I just like seeing it every day, It's just to keep steady.
How much of your family's history or story did you know growing up?
Oh, all of it. Look, we grew up in a conservative town. Modesto is a very conservative, predominantly white town. It's way more mixed now. But when we were there growing up in the 80s and 90s, my parents, sometimes it was just us, like we literally were in a Salvadorian desert, right? There was no others. But my dad talked to people. My dad was very charming. He talked people into coming to Modesto, like cousins. And so there was like some family that like we were nearby for a little while. And there was like a chunk of years where like we had my cousins there, which was really nice. But yeah, so I was raised to be very proud, which is why I'm very loud and proud about it, because my brain doesn't register not to be. I was never taught to be ashamed of my background. I was never taught to hide my background. I was taught to be very proud of it. Also, my dad was a singer and a guitarist in Los Hermanos Flores. So it was like I was never not raised to be super proud about my background, where we come from, what my parents gave up. Like we were never not informed. And I feel very fortunate.
Well, and we also represent this really weird divide, I guess. Or like I think Salvadorans have a really weird relationship with the U.S. because, Reagan funded a lot of the violence that happened in El Salvador. in his proxy battle in the Cold War. But he's also the reason that my parents were able to become citizens.
My mom too.
And so there's a lot of Salvadorans who like have this love of Reagan and like who feel very patriotic. And, for me, especially like going back, I feel more American than I do Salvadoran because I've lived here my whole life.
Yeah.
But I still, feel connected to El Salvador. It's just like, it's such a weird relationship.
It is. And it's also like why it is our responsibility to do stuff like this, to speak up and keep the legacies alive, because it is what we are capable of contributing to the legacy, to his legacy, which is, again, why I wanted to have that tattoo, because it's like, how many times am I going to have a conversation about my ethnic and racial background with a complete stranger? And it's pointless. What does it even matter what my background is, right? But I want you to know about this thing because also you'll learn about American history when you start reading up on him. And I think that all of that is important for people to carry with them. And I don't think people are politically and socially involved enough. And I think that this is like a good little stepping stone. My tattoo is like my little stepping stone to change conversation and influence people. That's why, again, I think it's so cool that you're doing this podcast. I really appreciate being included in this. No one ever includes me in these like Salvadorian things. So it's nice.
No, I mean, I remember when I don't remember how I first learned about you, because it was before, I think, that Latino USA show, and I saw that you were going to be on the lineup, and I was like, oh, fuck yeah. And then I saw your special on HBO, and I just like, it's that same thing where like, I already liked you, and then I learned that you were Salvi, and I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I want. That's how I want my fans to accrue. Like, I don't care what your background is. And if you happen to have the same background as me, and because you know what the thing is, I don't like when Salvadorians support me just for that, because there's a lot of conservative Latinos, period, but there's a lot of conservative Salvis. There's a lot of Salvis that they don't want a woman talking this much. Like, we have all those dumb stereotypes that, well, most races have, but definitely in the machismo ass land of Latinidad. And I'm just like, no, I need people to just like me for me. And then, when they discover my background, it's cooler. And then, because usually if people like the material that I do, they're usually politically savvy, socially aware, community oriented. So then they find out I'm super proud and I have this tattoo. They're like, what? Which is what I want, That's how I want it to build. I want it to be organic.
When we come back from the break, Marcella's surprising connection to one of Oscar Romero's killers. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back, and this is my conversation with Salvadoran American comedian Marcella Arguello. So when did your parents leave El Salvador? What year?
I want to say it was 81. Yeah, it was 81. Once it happened, once he was murdered, they were like, oh, we need to leave. But they still had to save up money. I mean, it's super expensive to come over here. People seem to forget that or not know that it's very, very expensive to come here. And so they basically saved for a year. And then they packed their bags that they ended up having to leave behind also. But they did it. And
you said did they land in Modesto from the beginning?
No.
You know what's wild? Alvaro Saravia Alvaro Saravia was the chief of security for Roberto Dawison, who everybody sort of considers the intellectual author of Oscar Romero's murder. Alvaro Saravia came to the U.S. after the murder. They all sort of went into the wind, and Alvaro Saravia was discovered to be living in Modesto, California. He had a used car shop.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know that. That I didn't know. See, that's so crazy. That's what I'm saying. Just when you learn something, there's more to learn. Whoa. I have to look into that.
And
that's going to blow my mom's mind.
It's in episode 3. We cover it in episode 3. But they ended up finding him, and the Center for Justice and Accountability sued him. And the judge ruled that he was responsible along with these unnamed John Does that were the oligarchs. Sure. And they ruled in favor of damages for $10 million.
Wow.
Against Alvaro Saravia because they found him in Modesto.
Well, I didn't know that. That is bombshell news to me. God, Modesto. Everybody knows somebody in Modesto. That's what they always say. And the thing is, if he owned a car shop, there's a chance that we We may have known him. Oh my God. Okay. I got to look into this. I did not know that. You got my legs shaking. I'm like, whoa.
Well, and that's the crazy thing is that like there's so many Salvadorans who came here after the war, both refugees, but also generals and captains and people in the Salvadoran military, oligarchs who just like left the country in tatters and were like, peace, bye.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? And that's the thing. We're everywhere.
I think a big part of creating that sort of unity within the Salvadoran community and the Salvadoran diaspora is for us to know our history and to know these stories, which is really the whole point of the podcast, is to try to, you know, as much for myself as for anybody else, to like really understand how hard it was for our parents to get here, what they were coming from, and how these cycles repeat in Salvadoran history.
Yeah. And I also feel like we're so close to so much sacrifice. It bothers me how many first generation people and even second and third generation people don't do more to improve everything for everyone, you know, because it's not just us, you know, doing right by our parents. It's like, no, I'm doing right for the next generation, you know, and making sure that, because I have 8 nieces and nephews, like, you know, we want to make sure they're raised as proud Salvadorian children, American children, because if we don't teach them how to make the pupusas, if we don't teach them about Oscar Romero, if we don't teach them about all of it, how are they going to keep it going? That is how cultures die, right? That's how histories die, and that's why, you know, word of mouth, storytelling, just all this type of communication is so important.
After a quick break, Marcella tells comedian Dale Hughley about her Oscar Romero tattoo. We'll be right back. We're back with my conversation with Marcella Arguello. I really hope that, you know, both you being like out there and proud Salvadoran and like the kind of work that I'm doing inspires that next generation to like be curious and ask questions, because that's the only way that you can stop history from repeating is by knowing that this kind of shit happened before.
Absolutely. I mean, that was I saw a tweet the other day that was so funny because it was like, how are you on the wrong, like how do you have access to history and you're still on the wrong side of history? Like, we've seen all of these things play out. And again, that's why I keep emphasizing it. Like, I am so happy to be included in this, but more than anything, I'm so happy that this exists now. You know, like, even if it reaches 100 Salvadorians that like they've never realized or they never knew or they never understood the depth of it, like that's 100 more. And then they get to tell 100 more. And then, you know, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And that's what you really want. Again, that's why I got the tattoo, because I wanted it to inspire conversation. So again, it's an honor to be involved in this, be participating in this, because it's exactly why I got the tattoo.
But it's not. But again, it's not even just Salvadorans. It's like it's Americans too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's cool about it. I did a show with Dale Hughley recently, and that was the first thing he noticed. Whoa, beautiful tattoo. And then because he loves politics and he's so socially informed and socially involved, I told him, you need to look him up. And I made sure to give him his name. And I was like, you need to look him up. I was like, you will be really interested in this man's story. And he was like, I will. I don't know if he did, but you know, that feeling like I'm giving people a nugget, another, like, I just think of it as another piece in the puzzle that makes American history more complex, more like people. There's a reason they're banning books, right? Because they don't want people to know these things. And I can only imagine if there was, you know, a book that was in the libraries that they didn't want to read. Like, this could easily be in it. Mm-hmm. Oscar Romero's history, the American U.S. government involvement, like this is the kind of stories they don't want people to know. That's why him being sainted was such a big deal. And and me, you know, I don't care how slow it is. That's what's cool about this. I feel like you're joining me on my journey of informing people about him, and not just Salvadorians, but everyone, because everybody should know what happened. It's true.
It's true. His story is just as important now as it was then. you know?
Yeah. Even more so now. People like want to refuse to believe that not just the U.S. government, but any government could be so corrupt. People just refuse to like really let that register in their head. And again, that is why his murder was considered the catalyst and the beginning of the Salvadoran Civil War, because it was so crazy. It was so unbelievable. I would imagine that people who heard about it couldn't even wrap their head around it when it happened. Imagine if you weren't there. Like, that's such a hard thing to understand and accept as a human being. They killed my priest? That's wild. During mass? That's crazy.
In front of a whole group of people in broad daylight?
One shot? A perfect shot? And y'all want to act like y'all weren't conspiring to get this done? Like, that's crazy. It's such a crazy story. It's just one of the most insane stories. And it goes into like MLK, JFK, like, it's not a coincidence.
We do an episode. So the series like starts with Oscar Romero and then sort of like does the domino effect. So we have like an episode about Roberto Leguizon. We have an episode about the 4 U.S. church women. And we have an episode about El Mozote and the massacre that happened in El Mozote. And a big part of the theme of that episode is the denial that happened afterwards, right? Like, it was reported almost immediately. Like, within weeks after the massacre, both the New York Times and the Washington Post had articles talking about the massacre, and both governments were like, I don't know if it happened like that, and nah, that's not right. And the denial, and it's fascinating to me how willing people are to deny the truth because an authority figure tells them that's not what happened.
Isn't that sad? Daddy issues, Americans, you guys got daddy issues. It's so
not my government.
Yeah. Not all governments. Okay, girl. I mean, and we're seeing it now, right? If it wasn't for TikTok, who knows what the narrative would be online right now about what's going on in Gaza? Like, who knows? It's crazy. We're so lucky right now. We're so fortunate to have that like instant sharing, that everyone has access to instant sharing. Like, it's a privilege. The internet is a privilege. And because it's like, imagine if we didn't have access to that, what would happen? Imagine if they hadn't killed him in front of a mass of people. Imagine if they had poisoned him. Like, it's so insane to think about. But when it's such an egregious act, I was at a mass in front of people and in one single shot right through the heart, you're like, I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it with my own eyes. That's cool.
I'm so glad I got to talk to you.
Thank you. This was very cool.
Sacred Scandal, Nation of Saints is a production of AHA Podcasts in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted and written by me, Jasmine Romero. Produced by Jasmine Romero with help from Alvaro Céspedes. Research and reporting by Jasmine Romero. Edited by Zaire Quevedo. Nation of Saints was recorded in New York City at the Relic Room with engineering by Brett Tugan. Mixing and sound design by Pachi Quiñones. Original music by Golden Minds, Darko and Aime, based on Patrick Hart's original composition. Fact-checking by Erendira Aquino Ayala. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Isaac Lee, Rose Reed, and Nando Villa. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. Sacred Scandal was created by Melanie Bartley and Paula Barros. The recording at the top of the episode is from Latino USA and provided courtesy of Futuro Studios. For more podcasts, go to the iHeartRadio app or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts.